Hello, this is our Voice Stories channel. The evening following Damien's wedding, we gathered together around the solid walnut table in Bend. The air still carried the haze of champagne, the sweetness of cake, and the dizzying echo of celebration. Sun River had provided everything my mother had ever longed for in such a day: lofty mountain peaks glowing orange at dusk, a string quartet filling the lawn with elegance, and family photographs staged like a luxury magazine spread. She raised her glass, eyes glinting with a metallic shine, and announced with reverence, "Your brother's wedding was perfection." Her voice floated upward like a hymn and then settled onto me with weight. The table erupted in a new wave of laughter, each relative recounting their favorite moment. Damien's twirl with his bride during the first dance, the heartfelt toast that brought tears even to the stoic ones, the small details that confirmed a fairy tale wedding had unfolded. I smiled politely, sliding the bread basket toward my uncle, maintaining my role, the agreeable daughter, the one who asked for little and never disrupted the scene. Then my cousin leaned forward, his grin slicing through the merriment with playful cruelty. "So," he teased, "when's your big moment? Or are you planning to shock us all and catch us off guard?" The table chuckled as if rehearsed. Even my father allowed himself a faint smirk, as though the jab was harmless, nothing more than family fun. I dropped my eyes to the napkin in my hands, twisting it tight. For a second, the chandelier's crystal beams caught my ring, flashing defiance before I slid my hand beneath the table, hiding the glimmer. My mother chimed in again, her tone hovering between jest and command. "Don't wait too long, dear. Time doesn't stand still." The laughter swelled, easy, practiced, familiar. I raised my glass and sipped, letting the sharpness of wine anchor me. My smile held steady, but beneath it a truth simmered, fragile as a spark. They were completely unaware the story they mocked had already been rewritten. They had no idea the punchline was theirs to keep. The conversation rolled on, voices climbing louder, as if my silence itself was an invitation for another jab. Damien's best man leaned back with a smirk. "Wait too long," he said, "and you'll be... what's it called?" He snapped his fingers, searching for the word. "Used goods." Laughter scattered around the table. My mother shook her head, pretending to be embarrassed for him but making no effort to correct him. Her smile was tight, as though the comment were not rude but simply an inconvenient truth. I swirled the Pinot in my glass, watching it catch the light. Heat crept up my neck, but I did not let it show. Silence had always been their favorite stage for me, and I had long since learned how to perform it. I smiled and said calmly, "It's already done." My tone was even almost casual. The words struck the table like a dropped fork on fine china. "You just weren't there." The laughter stopped. Forks froze midair. Glasses trembled, suspended. My cousin's grin faltered into confusion, his eyes searching my face for meaning. My mother blinked once, then again, as if her ears had misled her. "What?" she asked softly. I set my glass down carefully. "I'm married." The room constricted, air growing heavier. Damien's new wife shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable with this sudden revelation, caught in the undertow of a truth she had not expected to hear. My father cleared his throat but offered no words. My mother pressed forward, her voice sharpening, stripped of warmth. "6 months ago," I replied evenly. "Courthouse. Simple. No fuss." Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. Damien's eyes darted from me to our parents and back, caught between disbelief and irritation, as though I had torn through a carefully scripted family play. I folded my napkin neatly, leaning back in my chair, embodying calm. For years they had confused my quiet with weakness. Tonight they would finally learn it had always been restraint. Their questions erupted then, voices tangling into one another, urgent, insistent, demanding explanations I had no desire to give. The din of their inquiries blurred in my ears, fading into another memory, the moment I realized I had been written out of their story. It was a quiet evening in Portland, late spring. The city was stretching into warmth after months of endless rain. Every day, I checked the small mailbox outside my apartment on Laurelhurst Street, waiting for the envelope I believed would arrive. Thick, ornate lettering, carrying my name in celebration. Damien's wedding consumed my mother's phone calls, so I trusted she wouldn't forget me, that my presence would be expected. But the mailbox only held bills, flyers, and coupons. Finally, I asked. My mother's tone over the phone was dismissive, featherlight. We thought you'd be swamped with work, dear. Those teaching schedules are so demanding. Damien added, we figured it might be complicated. You bringing someone, each excuse polished and rehearsed, impossible to dispute. On the morning of the wedding, I lingered in bed longer than usual, an ache weighing my body. By afternoon, my phone buzzed without pause. Social media glowed with pictures. Damien and his bride along the Deschutes River, her gown blazing in golden light, my parents radiant as royalty. A group photo displayed cousins, aunts, uncles, all dressed in coordinated cream and sage. The caption beneath read, "Family forever." I stared until the screen blurred. I didn't cry, not then. I scrolled through the endless stream of images, my heart racing, searching desperately for proof that it was a mistake, that my invitation had slipped through unnoticed. None came. Instead, silence swallowed me. No call, no apology. Just a flawless story told without me. That night, I sat by my apartment window, Portland's streetlights lined like glowing sentinels. The betrayal wasn't merely being excluded. It was the realization that I had never truly been counted in. Months later, when I finally spoke those words at the table in Bend, the truth had already crystallized in me, hardened in the quiet absence of an invitation. 6 months earlier, I had stood with Rowan inside the Multnomah County Courthouse on Southwest 4th Avenue. Our hands were clasped tightly as we walked across the marble floors of the courthouse, each step echoing in the vast hall, our reflections stretching and elongating against the glass doors. A clerk checked our documents briskly, her face impassive from routine, and a judge asked the simple but weighty question, were we ready? That was it. 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, vows spoken without hesitation. No carefully chosen seating charts, no endless speeches, no eager relatives snapping photographs. Just the 2 of us, steady and deliberate, making something ours. When we stepped outside, Portland's afternoon sky was heavy and gray, the city humming to its own rhythm. Rowan held a small bouquet of calla lilies wrapped in butcher paper, my favorite flowers, chosen with his usual thoughtfulness. Together we walked toward Tom McCall Waterfront Park, the river cutting a silver path between its bridges. A light breeze caught the edge of my borrowed veil, lifting it briefly into the air until Rowan reached quickly and caught it before it could float away. I laughed, my voice spilling into the open space, uncontained by walls. We paused on a rise overlooking the water, the steel arches of the Hawthorne Bridge framing us in the distance. There, without an audience or choreography, we pulled from our pocket scraps of paper covered in handwriting. Promises we had written privately, words shaped by sincerity rather than performance. My hands trembled as I held my page, not from fear but from stepping fully into something I claimed as mine. Rowan slid a thin gold band onto my finger, one we had picked together in a small shop off Hawthorne Boulevard. No applause followed, no tears from a gathered crowd. Only the river bore witness, its surface rippling in the wind. That was enough. Later that day, Rowan knelt in the soil near our Mount Tabor rental, pressing lily bulbs into the ground with careful hands. Now your name grows here, he said, his voice quiet but firm, anchoring me. The next day, I mailed a photograph to my parents. In it, I was spinning, my hair a wild halo, Rowan's arms steady around me, my laughter brighter than it had been in years. I waited for their call, or even a note acknowledging they had received it. Nothing came. Silence filled the space where recognition might have lived, louder than rejection itself. It was the clearest confirmation that my joy had no place in their narrative. By the time Damien's wedding unfolded, I already knew how little space I occupied in their story. That silence was not new, it had a long history. Damien's baseball trophies had always lined the fireplace mantel, catching the light, while his debate plaques gleamed beside them. Even a second-place science fair ribbon had earned a place of pride. My drawings, framed in cheap wood, were stacked in a closet down the hall, gathering dust. When neighbors visited, my mother steered them to Damien's display. Her voice swelled with warmth and admiration as she recited his achievements. If anyone asked about me, she would say lightly, "Eloine's our quiet one, always so helpful." Each December, her holiday letters were composed on thick cream stationery, boasting about Damien's promotions, internships, his engagement. For me, a single vague line sufficed, Yellow stays busy with her projects. There was no mention of the mural I painted at the community center, the one children pointed to with delight. No mention of the grant I secured to expand school art programs. My name existed only as punctuation, a formality, present but unimportant. At first, I convinced myself invisibility meant safety. If I didn't ask for much, I couldn't let them down. If I remained dependable, I would at least be left alone. But invisibility has a cost. It hardens into a cage, locking you outside of your own story until you begin to wonder if you were ever truly inside of it. By Damien's wedding, I had stopped questioning. I saw the pattern clearly. I wasn't simply forgotten. I was being edited out, erased carefully under the guise of harmony. My mother curated a pristine narrative. A son who excelled, a daughter who did not cause complications. Each omission cut deeper. Her letters that ignored my accomplishments. Her tears for Damien's bride, but indifference toward the man I loved. Her silence after receiving the courthouse photo. Those wounds bled together until the night in Bend, when I finally let the truth escape. That revelation wasn't a bomb dropped in spite. It was a boundary drawn, a decision not to retreat anymore. 2 days later, an email arrived in my inbox from my father. Just a single line. "Can we talk? Just us." His silence had long fortified my mother's control, so I nearly deleted it, unwilling to step into another staged scene. But something, curiosity or maybe the faintest hope, pulled me toward Fuller's coffee shop. The place smelled faintly of scorched coffee and fried bacon. I found him already seated in a red vinyl booth, his coffee half drunk, his hands clasped together like he was holding a fragile secret. His eyes softened when he saw me. "I kept the photo," he said without preamble. I frowned, not understanding, until he slid an envelope across the table. Inside was the courthouse photo I had mailed months before. Its edges were worn, creased as though it had been handled many times. "Your mother called it disrespectful," he said quietly, but I couldn't throw it away. I stared at the image, my hair loose and wild, my laughter captured mid-spin, Rowan's arms steady around me. My throat tightened. "Why?" I asked. He stared into his coffee before answering. "Because it felt real. Because I wanted to hold on to something that was yours." His words sounded breakable, as though they would shatter if I pressed him too hard. Silence stretched between us until he asked, "Is he good to you?" "Yes," I answered firmly. "Better than being unseen." He pressed his lips together, both relieved and chastised by my words. He nodded slowly, offering no promises, just acknowledgement. Late, partial, incomplete. I folded the photo back into its envelope. "Keeping it doesn't undo the rest," I told him. He didn't argue. His eyes held a mixture of apology and resignation. 2 days later, a thick cream envelope appeared at my doorstep, leaning against my apartment door. Embossed with the family crest in gold, it contained Damien's wedding album. There was no note, no return address, no explanation. Just glossy pages filled with a world I had not been invited to. Scripted captions adorned the images. The rehearsal dinner at Sun River. The lakeside ceremony framed by mountains. My mother's tearful toast. Then I turned the page and froze. The page stopped me cold. A perfectly composed family portrait stretched across the glossy sheet. Everyone stood aligned like a magazine spread, all smiles flawless, the image crafted for permanence. Beneath the names, written in elegant calligraphy, I saw Damien, my parents, and between them, a woman with dark hair wearing a dress that could have been mine. Except it wasn't me. It was a cousin from Vermont, nearly my height, nearly my coloring. The caption below her face read, "Marin Holt." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just that they had excluded me, they had rewritten me with another person's face. Rowan, drying his hands in the kitchen, leaned over my shoulder and caught sight of the page. His jaw clenched hard, his voice quiet but certain. "They replaced you," he whispered, then softer. "That means they knew you belonged." His words were meant to soothe, but they pierced instead. If I truly belonged, why erase me? Why substitute me? Rebrand me, and call it truth? I closed the album carefully, fearful the false images might spill into the air around me. The heavy envelope with its gleaming crest still sat on the counter, demanding response. I uncapped a black marker, staring at the pristine front. The next morning, I carried it outside, my hand steady as I wrote a single word across the crest in bold, slashing strokes. Return. No explanation. No apology. Just the truth carved where they could not ignore it. I dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox on the corner. The metal was icy under my fingers. The clang as it fell echoed sharp and final, sealing something that words never could. That evening, my inbox glowed. A new email waited. The subject line from my mother. You blindsided us. Her message was polished, each sentence sharp, rehearsed. She accused me of cruelty, claimed Damien's wife was devastated, insisted the dinner revelation had been unnecessary. I read it twice, hunting for some sign she had wondered why I had stayed silent so long. There was none. 2 hours later, Damien posted a photo online. He and his bride stood at Sun River, glasses lifted. The caption read, "Real love shows up." Comments flooded beneath, friends cheering, relatives praising. I didn't reply. It wasn't written for me. Instead, I opened my notebook and began planning something entirely mine. Not a redo wedding, not a staged spectacle. A gathering that couldn't be edited out or rebranded. I chose Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden in southeast Portland, where wooden bridges crossed quiet ponds and blooms spilled over every corner. A place where presence outweighed performance. I wrote a list of 30 names. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, people who had shown up for me without being asked, people who saw me without revision. Rowan looked at the list over my shoulder and said softly, "This feels true." For the first time in months, I felt light enough to believe him. On the evening of our gathering, the garden pulsed with more than flowers. Lanterns glowed along the bridges, their reflections dancing across the water. Voices blended with the trickle of streams over stones. 30 chairs formed a circle, no stage, no head table, just space for everyone to belong. Guests arrived carrying pies, jars of lemonade, flowers freshly cut from their own gardens. Work friends, neighbors, even 2 of my former students. Each face testified that I didn't need to audition for my place. Rowan squeezed my hand before we stepped into the center of the circle. We weren't there to perform. We were there to share what had once been private. Together we spoke our courthouse vows again, this time aloud, unashamed. My voice broke once, not from nerves but from the weight that lifted as I spoke. No one compared our words to Damien's ceremony. No one judged my dress. They were simply present, listening with open eyes and open hearts. From the corner of my vision, I glimpsed someone unexpected. My father stood near the stone steps, unannounced. He didn't interrupt, didn't pose for attention. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable but his focus steady on us. When the vows ended and gentle applause rippled through the circle, he didn't leave. As I passed by him, he whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "I'm learning how to show up." I said nothing in return. Words would have diminished the moment. As the night deepened, candles were lit and set afloat on the pond, drifting gently, their reflections shimmering across the water's surface. Beautifully imperfect, just like us. Weeks later, another email from my mother appeared. The subject line, "Ready to talk when you are." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had been done, just a door opened slightly on her terms. I answered with my own boundary. Any conversation would be without edits, without fabricated invitations, without replacing my name with someone else's. My life would not bend to her curated version of family. She didn't reply immediately. My father did. His note was brief but carried weight. "I hear you. I'll respect it." It was the closest he had ever come to a promise. Damien's message arrived days later, sharp with accusation about loyalty and embarrassment. His words cut, but they rang hollow. I let them pass unanswered, wielding silence this time on my terms. One evening, Rowan and I walked the East Bank Esplanade. The city skyline glittered across the Willamette, cyclists breezed past, joggers kept their rhythm, and the river flowed north with steady indifference. In my pocket, I felt the courthouse photo, edges worn but still intact. I pulled it out and studied it. My laughter caught in motion, my dress blurred mid-twirl, Rowan's arms firm around me. For months, that photograph had been proof of love, of defiance, of a life that didn't require their approval. Now it was something else. A reminder not of exclusion, but of what we had chosen for ourselves. I slipped it back into my pocket and leaned against the railing, watching the bridge's lights shimmer across the water. For the first time in years, The story ahead of me was truly mine. No revisions hovering. No audience to appease. The river moved beneath us, carrying time forward, and the weight of family transformed into something I could choose to carry or set down. And I chose. Goodbye.